Hello everyone, it's Coach Robert again with a video about underpromotion. So you might be wondering what underpromotion even means. Well, promotion means that you're going to take a pawn, get it to the other side, and you can get an additional piece, one of the four pictured here. Obviously you can't promote to a pawn or a king, that would lead to probably civil war. But you can choose queen, knight, rook, or bishop. So it's promotion, it's called promotion like the ordinary sense of the word promotion because they're moving up in value from pawn to a higher value piece. And you would think intuitively that you should always choose the highest value piece, which most people reckon to be the queen. But there are situations where you don't want to select a queen, and this is what chess players call underpromotion. So once you realize that it actually might make sense sometime to choose these three lower pieces, you'll probably immediately wonder, like, why? Why would you do that ever? Like, what's the point? So I've broken down this video into a set of situations in which you might promote to a lower piece. I haven't shown an exhaustive list because honestly it's kind of hard to find examples in real practice where you promote to a bishop, for example. But these situations do exist, so let's just focus on the types of scenarios in which you would underpromote. And I would categorize them as avoiding stalemate when you're winning, avoiding getting checkmated when your opponent has a strong threat, checkmating without a queen, so that would mean that a queen is inadequate. It's not just that it's faster or something, but that if you get a queen you actually will not be able to deliver checkmate, so that's when you would promote to something lower. Promotion for a double attack, which would lead to a material advantage because you don't have any checkmating opportunities, and controlling key squares. So that would be when maybe your opponent has a threat and you stop it by promoting. That's a very common one. And the last thing would be to gain time. So maybe you are in the midst of an attacking sequence and you just need to keep attacking the king, and promoting to a queen is not check, so you would promote to a different piece. So anyway, let's see our first example. This is a famous study. Most of the examples that I've put together are from actual games played online by people other than myself. And this one's exceptional because I really like this this motif that we see here. This is actually not the full study, and I think the rook's not in the place where you would normally see it. So you might run across a position very much like this later on when you're solving some endgame studies. If you're interested in endgame studies in general, you should check out my favorite studies series that I already put out. So anyway, here, the average Joe would probably just say, hey, let's get that queen, right? And as is usually the case in my pre-recorded lectures, you can always pause the video in situations like this and ask yourself, you know, why are we not promoting to a queen here? Try to solve this for yourself. But I'll be moving right along. So if you promote to a queen, you would have a material advantage. Queen against rook is very, very often a win. It's a difficult win much of the time, but here, since black king is in the corner, you'd think it would be pretty easy. But the upshot of having your king in the corner is that you can't really move it anywhere. So if black was able to play a move which would force white to control this square, this would be stalemate. So that's a hint. So if you're still solving and you're not sure, you could pause it again. The move that black would play is this one. It's check. It's attacking the queen. So white's forced to take it, and that's stalemate. So this is an example where you have to think a little bit ahead to realize that getting the most valuable piece is actually a worse move. You would want a piece that does not result in stalemate. So this actually makes sense. You might be thinking, like, well, why did you pick such fancy examples to explain underpromotion? Couldn't you make it any simpler? Well, underpromotion is an exceptional case. Almost always getting a queen is the best because it either allows you to win more material because of the queen's ability to access the opponent's weaknesses, or because, you know, it's just easy to checkmate with a queen if the material is very much reduced. So we're going to see exceptional cases when we talk about underpromotion. You've probably guessed by now that we should promote to a rook, not a knight. That would be silly. Promoting to a knight would lead to a sure loss. Actually, promoting to any piece other than a rook will lead to losing, because rook and king can checkmate. So if you don't know that, you should look it up. It's very well documented how you win with just a rook. So anyway, if we get a rook, you might think, well, this is just a draw. Like, it's not even worth considering underpromotion here because it's a rook, there's another rook, draw, right? No. So the reason that this is not a draw is that if black moves their king, this is the only possible move, so that's my example. This is mate in 2, right? They have to block, and then that's our classic rook checkmate. So they actually have to play this move, because that's the only move with the rook that reasonably prevents rook a8. But then here, white has a winning move. And it's a little bit hard to see, but not that hard, so I'd encourage you guys to pause the video and take a look for it. It's a king move, which is probably why it's difficult at all. We have to gain a tempo by attacking the rook, and whenever it goes somewhere, it doesn't really matter, there's going to be a checkmate down here in either 1, 2, or just some different number of moves. It's going to lead to a win. They could probably delay it by playing like rook c4 or something ridiculous like that. But that's the gist of it. Somehow in this position with just rooks, we still lead to a winning position by having the superior king placement. And in order to reach this good position, we had to underpromote. So this is an example of underpromotion to avoid stalemate. Here's our next example. And I ordered these in order of like how often I think they're going to appear. And this one is underpromotion to avoid checkmate. So the first thing is, you should ask yourself, if I make a queen, this is black to play. How is it possible that I could get checkmated if I just make a queen here? It's a pretty simple answer, but you can pause it if you're still looking. If you make a queen, this is again that basic checkmate with the rook. So it's critical that we give a check. For that reason, we should obviously promote to a knight. A lot of the examples that I picked today are under promotion to a knight. The reason for that is not that I really like knights, it's that most of the time, in a situation where you could underpromote to a rook or a bishop, a queen will do just as well. So underpromotions to a knight are actually more common. So this doesn't mean when you want to underpromote you should automatically choose knight. You should think it through. There are plenty of examples where you need to underpromote to a bishop as well, or to a rook, like in the last example. You might still be doubting, like, are we winning here? But just look a little bit further. Whatever they play, we're getting a queen here, and this check is useless. You might still have doubts because you can, you might still have doubts because you can see that one of these pawns is running, but you just see they're like way too slow. So, under promotion to a knight first, and then you can get your queen with the other pawn. So here's our next example, which is again a different type. This is a situation where a queen is inadequate. You could probably guess this from asking yourself the question, what will black do in this position if it was their turn? It's white, but imagining your opponent's move is a very good thinking technique. Here, obviously the queen is lined up with a king, and there's a rook in the mix. So they would probably move this rook somewhere with devastating effect. At the very least, it would still remain a complex game if they, for example, played like rook c6 and took your queen. But they might even have better options. You'll need to scrutinize it that closely to find a win or something scary for black. It's just clear from a cursory examination that we should not blindly promote to a queen. In fact, I wouldn't start calculating promotion to a queen because it's very complicated until I've examined the simpler options. So you might want to pause the video and see if you can find something simpler than promoting to a queen and allowing a flurry of checks. Simpler doesn't mean easier to find, but you should examine the forcing moves first. So look for the checks. I think there's only one check that really stands out. You also shouldn't just automatically promote with check just because you see that you're in danger. This might be good in some situations, but I think that promoting to a knight here is not that precise. It might still be interesting, but there's definitely a clean finish here where you start with queen g6. And this is nice because it has the idea of promoting to a knight on the next move. If you go here, this is easy. We can promote to whatever we want here. Here's another under promotion. So the real test is what happens if they take. If you didn't see this, you could pause again. But it's pretty clear, just from the topic, that this is our checkmate with a knight and a rook. And a pawn, I guess. And the help of their own pawns. These quisling pawns. Yeah, so this is a pretty cool example. Promoting to a queen would be inadequate. This is definitely the cleanest way to finish when your opponent has some counterplay. So promoting under to like a knight or usually a knight for a checkmate is another motif. Okay, So this one is black to play, and maybe a little bit harder than before, but this is just a second example of under promotion for checkmate. So you may want to pause the video and have yourself a think here. Whenever the pawns are getting to the 7th, even the 6th rank, you know, if they're on the 6th or the 7th rank, you should start thinking about these promotion techniques. The only reason is that, you know, that's when they're going to happen, so you should keep a keen eye out for that motif. Some people calculate only by looking at the forcing moves. They don't think about the patterns that they've seen in general. I would encourage you to do both. Look at the most forcing moves, like all the checks all the time, like in the other video that I made. But also consider what patterns we know. Now, given that this is about under promotion, you would want this rook out of the way, right? It's black to play, so we want to promote this pawn. Probably we're going to go on one of these squares. That should guide your calculation to queen g1. And they're forced to play. But then here, you shouldn't just automatically recapture, because if you recapture here, I don't care if it's a knight or a queen, it's just not good. They can just take it. So you should think a little bit longer and find this under promotion to a knight. Now the reason that this is good is that, first of all, it's double check, so they can't interpose. That's a nice thing about under promoting to a knight, actually. It's an unblockable check. That can be really valuable sometimes. Here they can only play king h1, and this leads to a checkmate with the rook. Notice that if it was a queen on f1, this would not support for a checkmate on h2. So this is a really cool example of that. Okay, here's our next one. So another motif in under promotion is under promotion for a double attack. If you can win with a material advantage, it might be simpler to get rid of their pieces than to just accrue more queens. For example, in this position, we could get our queen back right away. No problem. But there is a downside. So it's black to play and get counterplay. Just think it through. Clearly black's not going to take the queen, because they would be losing terribly with king and some paltry pawns against rook and bishop. So this becomes an exercise in perpetual check. So you give a check, and even if the bishop gives a block, then maybe not even perpetual check. Here they might have to sacrifice on f7 to avoid a disaster, because if they play like the bishop back to where it was, then this will be checkmate. And if they try to make space, they should still lead to perpetual check, like this. They'll shake hands pretty soon. So I think after queen f2, they would probably just take this. But this is a really different scenario from before. Anyway, this is a lesson for another time, so we could just skip over that. So we need to somehow avoid letting them play queen c1. It's complicated. Let's try to keep things simple. So we should consider some forcing options to prevent that counterplay. So you might want to pause here. How do we stop them from playing queen c1? And then how can we combine that with the under promotion? So rook c7 is the most direct way of stopping them from playing queen c1. And you might be wondering what happens after they take this rook. Well, we can under promote to a knight. And whatever happens next, this is an overwhelming advantage for white. Much simpler than allowing some checks. We should usually choose the most efficient win that we can, at least when we're training. Whatever's easy is good to play in a game, but when you're training and trying to expand your mental powers, you should really try for the most efficient win. And that's definitely rook c7. Okay, so here's another example. It's a little bit more ephemeral, but it also demonstrates a pretty common pattern, so I thought this was important to include. So here white has two knights against three pawns. Sounds like a draw is going to happen, right? But there's a resource here for black, and it's black to play, that enables them to use under promotion to their advantage. The first, well, this is actually a somewhat deep puzzle now that I think about it, because we have these two pawns running down, and you might just ask yourself, like, why don't we simply like push one of them or the other one. Like, why don't we just push these pawns? So you might want to work that out on your own. Pause the video. Like, why are we not just promoting? The first and most important thing, in my opinion, is that if you promote to a queen here, they're not going to take it. If they take it, you're actually winning. I don't want to spoil it, though. You'll see in the main line. But they will take it like this in 2 moves. And this secures their position because they keep control of the square where this pawn wants to advance. So that's a disaster. We don't want that. And if we push this one, it will be very similar because now they can take this pawn and they're controlling the promotion square. So how do we deal with all those problems? It seems very promising for black because their king is in the right place, the pawns are right about to promote. How does underpromotion help us here? Well, white wants to play this move. It happened in 2 of the critical variations that we examined. So we should promote to a knight. Sounds crazy, I know, because after they take it, they could still play knight e2. But this is where the very common motif that I wanted to show appears. Whenever you have a situation like this, it's quite difficult to stop the pawn from promoting because it has 2 options right next to each other. And knights are not very good at controlling the corner. Even if they throw this check, I don't think it really helps. Maybe just go here. I don't care if they take this pawn, because now the knight can't control the corner. We're going to promote, probably with check. So this is a really nice pattern. You're going to want to remember not just the part where we control the square that's critical in this variation, but also this pattern where we double attack the promotion square and the knight. It's hard to visualize the double attacks on empty squares sometimes, and this is an especially weird one because it's utilizing the fact that pawns have 2 ways of moving when they're capturing versus not capturing. Okay, this next one is arguably the most common, but it's also the most diverse in how it shows up. So I kind of saved this one for later. In this example, we want to promote to a queen, as usual, as black. But if we do, we run into trouble, just like in the earlier variations. So you may want to pause the video and ask yourself what happens if you promote to a queen here on b1. And the answer is that if you make a queen, or anything besides a knight, really, it's going to be mate in 2, because our king's trapped on the edge of the board. Again, it's funny how often you're getting checkmate on the edge of the board in these endgames. People usually think of the endgame as kind of like a stale, not very fun part of the game, but I disagree. There's a lot of tactical moments. So the next thing that might come to mind is, why don't we just underpromote? That's what the video is all about, right? Let's just automatically underpromote. Well, no, because after like king takes c4, you might want to promote this pawn, but white has a crucial tempo. That's why this example of gaining tempo, winning time with underpromotion is important. It turns out there was a better way, because in this situation they can just capture the pawn at their leisure, and they're winning with this other pawn. So we can't just underpromote to a knight. We have to be a little bit more clever. This one's pretty hard, so you might want to pause again with those hints and think about it some more. The first move has nothing to do with pushing the pawns. It's actually a prophylactic move defending against rook a7. But underpromotion is still in the cards, because after rook a7, now when we underpromote, it's different. After they move the king, and they can only move the king here, that's really important. Now we play d2, and we're getting our queen. So we won time here, because if we simply promote to a knight, they have the option to play king takes c4. So we first prepare this. Now when it comes to check, there's nothing they can really do. This is also an example of controlling key squares, because when the knight promotes, it controls the square in front of the pawn, which is usually the best place to blockade and corral the pawn from. So a little bit of a complex example here. Okay, This one, probably I should have ranked this one a little bit higher in terms of frequency. This one is another situation where we want to underpromote because it's check and wins us some time. But it's also a combination with another tactical motif, which is line clearance. So pause the video here. It's black to play. How are we going to take advantage of this pawn that's ready to promote? I should also mention that, and I think every single example here, except for the study, they failed to find the right combination. I think that's largely because they didn't have underpromotion in their minds at the time. It's also because I picked games that came from pretty fast time controls. So maybe if they had more time, they would have noticed. Like, it was in their mind, they just didn't see it. But I really think it's because they weren't thinking underpromotion. When you know the motif ahead of time, things are a lot easier, generally. And I recommend training your tactics by motif, not by random problem sets. Because it helps you to know what you're looking for. And you can test yourself with random problem sets later. Okay, so here, the way they played in the game was with queen takes c1. So you might have already been wondering, why don't you just do that? So this becomes an exercise in perpetual check, sort of like one of the earlier examples. So you can pause here and see if you can find the perpetual. It takes a lot of moves, so this is like a considerable exercise. So you can work it out on your own. If you want to know if you're correct, just post your variation in the chat at the end. I'll get back to you. There's lots of ways that you can get a perpetual, so I think that's probably the easiest way. So here we should promote to a knight because it's check. And this is helpful because everything that comes next can come with check. So they took the knight, allowing rook e2. So this is the line clearance. If you just played rook e2 here, it would be too slow. You're threatening something very strong, but it gives them time to play a move like queen b5 check, which is the first move of that sequence that we were just talking about. So it's critical that they make the knight first and then throw the check. And after this, everything else comes with check and it's all over. You might want to pause here and see if you can calculate until you get a winning position, because at least on the surface, this is very, very close in material. But after pausing and taking a look, you'll probably find f5. See that they can only really go here. And find queen c1 and rook e6. It doesn't really matter where they went there. And then rook e7 for a tempo. And after queen takes c4, you're protecting b5 and all these other important squares. So you should be able to capitalize on their poor king placement. Okay, so that was the last example that I wanted to show for today. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions or comments, just leave them in the comment section, and I'll definitely get back to you. Until next time, take care.